All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the 2020 election and sort of a method by which you can get a better picture of what's likely to happen. Now, you can never say for sure because your analysis could be wrong, and you must put your bias aside if you're going to use this method. If you're like a partisan Republican, partisan Democrat, don't bother. You're not going to be able to. Or if you lean heavily towards being kind of partisan, you have to be fully independent and detached in many cases. Like I've said, I like a lot of Trump's policies. I support building the wall. I love the tax reform. But I'm not a Republican. I'm not a super fan. I don't own a MAGA hat or anything. I'm an independent. At the drop of a hat, pun intended, Trump could piss me off and I could switch and say, okay, well, I can't vote for him in 2020. Like he starts a war in Venezuela, that'd be a big game changer politically for me. You have to be unbiased. And the way to do it is this, looking at the election. The first thing you ask yourself is quite simple. Does the individual look believable? Like if they were playing the role of the president on a movie or something. They make a new political action thriller and this person has to play the president in some role. Do they look believable? Now on the Republican side it's very simple. Trump is the president. He automatically looks believable. This, by the way, is why there's what's called an incumbent advantage. Incumbents have a slight advantage over their opponents. In any race, even if it's a shitty incumbent, they have an advantage. They're already there. People don't like to rock the boat. They look believable because they're already in whatever role they're running for. On the other side, it's a little bit different. On the other side, we can sort of look through the candidates, or like Joe Biden hasn't officially gotten in. Joe Biden, I put at number one on believability. Now, remember, this has nothing to do with policy. We have to consider that separately. Policy has nothing to do with it. It's just optics. It's the elocution, the charisma. How well are they spoken? What their physical appearance is. How they don themselves up. You know, do they look pretty for the cameras, basically. Joe Biden is number one. Why? He may be an older dude and doesn't look, great. He's been one step from the presidency. He's been a vice president. None of the other Democratic challengers have been in as high level an executive position. In fact, I think the only other person currently in the running with executive experience at all is, if I'm correct, Julian Castro, mayor of San Antonio. Gillibrand, senator. Cory Booker, senator. Elizabeth Warren, senator. You're seeing a pattern here. Kamala Harris, I believe, is a representative, I think. No, Kamala Harris, I believe, is a senator. It's Gabbard, I think, is a representative. By the way, representatives never as esteemed, don't do as well as senators. So yeah, I would put him at number one just because of that. Now, we have to consider other things separately, and that's the big step too, which I think weighs heavily on Biden, almost more than anyone else in the field. But he's got number one when it comes to that. I would put at the bottom Bernie Sanders. He's a goofy man. He's seen as sort of his fans even see him as a little kooky. Sort of a crazy old man, but they like his policies and stuff. He's pure legislative. The only executive office he ever held was mayor of Burlington. That was in the 1970s. He has consistently been a representative and then senator since then. I think in his second year of being in the Senate before that. How many terms did he serve in the House? I can't even recall. It was like, 10 terms or some crazy shit like that. He's a long-term politician, but it's almost all legislative experience. Biden is the only person with major executive experience within the Democratic field. And then you've got some people that are sort of like, private individuals that get business experience. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's probably better than just having been a representative or a mayor or something. But I would put Biden number one. I'd say number two would probably be Gillibrand. Now, again, she has her own problems, but if you were to put her in a role as a president, she would be highly believable. She's well-spoken, she literally looks nice for the cameras and stuff like that. Kamala would be a number three, I think, which is a huge advantage. Specifically, in her case, she has been a hothead prosecutor, a very extreme law and order tyrannical individual, I would argue. The opposite of someone who likes personal freedom. But she has that sort of corporate hawk mentality, that legal expertise. It makes her, she'd be believable cast in that role. Again, I would say at the bottom are Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, who he breaks down crying and he looks kind of weird, kind of wonky. Gabbard, simply because of her age. I would say Gabbard's age, well, if you're in your 40s or 50s, maybe it's a good thing to be on the younger side of politics. If you're running, more energy, you look better like a Gillibrand or a Kamala or something. With Gabbard, though, it's really, she's not even 40 yet. So, yeah, it's not as bad as like being Cory Booker and being like semi-deformed. It's not as bad as Sanders looking just like a crazy old man, but she's down there, I would say, on the bottom rung. Julian Castro is on the upper end. He looks the part, he speaks the part, but again, experience-wise, a little different. And then Elizabeth Warren sort of, it's hard to categorize her, because when she's just giving a teleprompted speech, she's all right. She kind of looks the role. But when she gets antagonized or confronted, when she has to speak in a spontaneous manner, and this is another problem for Biden, she breaks down, gets antagonistic, and would be below Bernie Sanders. She no longer looks the part. She looks like your wine aunt who gets not too many drinks in her and starts rambling angrily about politicians she doesn't like. Then you have to look at something separately. Major baggage. That's really the name of the game. Are there any major scandals? Like, if they look believable, is there anything major that could prevent them from being elected anyway? Biden is at the bottom of the goddamn heap for the Democrats when it comes to this. There are hundreds of images and videos of Joe Biden being kind of creepy with women all the way down to very young ages. He doesn't seem to care. If it's female, Joe gets a little bit touchy-feely. Now, do I think, well, Pizzagate, he's a child molester? No, I don't think that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying he's too touchy-feely. He looks like a little bit like a creepy old man. Like that, what's that character from, Family Guy there? The old man? Sort of like that minus actual physical intent. He's too touchy-feely. He's doing the Clinton schmooze, basically. And he doesn't do it as well as Clinton. We're in the Me Too fucking generation. Yes, this could absolutely become a problem for him. I think that might be the major reason he's waiting so long. I think he's still got his staff looking through. Look, get some focus groups going. If you show people pictures like this, because they're going to be spread around the internet, is it going to hamper my campaign? Because I don't want to lose to Bernie. He's only entering the race, if he does, 5 to 10 points ahead of Sanders, and that's quite a gap, but it's easily overcome, especially if Sanders manages to fend off a couple of the far leftists, which he can easily do. He's got the chops for that. He's got the most experience. He is among the better spoken, hilariously, of the Democrats, despite being almost an octogenarian now. And Joe Biden's no spring chicken. That's a big problem for him, too. I've pointed that out. Now, you look through the others, baggage-wise. Cory Booker, he breaks down crying all the time. Get him up on a debate stage, he gets too emotional, he sheds tears, he's done. He fucking loses at that point. Kamala Harris, hypocrite on the drug war, hardliner against crime, and yet has posted cringy bullshit about listening to Tupac and getting high. That's major baggage. Kirsten Gillibrand, I think, has one of the worst pieces of baggage. Remember, she not only endorsed but campaigned for the former New York AG there. Like, she was bosom buddies with him. It turns out, too bad, that person was in fact beating up their girlfriends, allegedly, and had to resign. Again, Me Too generation, that's a big thing at the forefront of people's minds. If they are motivated by wedge issue identity voting, not so much like if they're motivated by pure political issues, they like Trump for taxes, maybe they like, they want gun control, they vote Democrat or something. But as far as the identity issues go, it's really about, femaleness and race and things like that. You've also got some racially insensitive baggage, like Elizabeth Warren. I've said her campaign is already gone. She's got 8 or 9% support. Wonderful. She's number 3 in a 12-person race. That doesn't really matter. It's not going to translate to an Elizabeth Warren presidential campaign. I predict she will lose. She'll be one of the early people to drop out because she'll tank, specifically when that is brought up. Hey, you lied about your ethnicity for 30 years. We're the party that's supposed to condemn Trump from a racism or whatever. This is how they'll attack her. We're supposed to be the ones condemning racism, and yet you lied and said you were Native American and powwow chow and all this stuff. And it'll sink her campaign. And they'll say, look, if she becomes the nominee, we're going to lose Nevada. We'll probably lose New Mexico. That wouldn't be good for she certainly would lose Virginia, which is already tipping on the edge after the scandals they had there. Northam's still there to be dead weight, by the way. The fact that none of these people resign is going to weigh heavily. It's going to weigh around the Democratic Party's neck. So we have to look at baggage. As far as Trump, it doesn't seem to affect him the same way that it affects most people because of the way he acts. His baggage almost just becomes a tabloid floor show. I'm beginning to think that the baggage part of this proposal is less important than the look, the charisma, specifically because people are becoming desensitized to the idea of baggage. Oh, the candidate said fuck years ago. 10 years ago would have been a big thing. Now it's like, I see worse on Twitter every day. Who cares? The Billy Bush tape didn't do anything to Trump's approval. It literally didn't affect it at all. It was hilarious when it didn't. Again, 10 years prior would have sunk a presidential campaign. They would have dropped out immediately. Trump, he says, oh yeah, it was locker room talk. No, I didn't grope anybody. I was just telling Billy Bush that, and he gobbled it down because he's weak-minded. That's basically what it's about. Poor dude lost his job for chuckling mildly at Trump saying grab her by the pussy. It was an interesting time. So there's a little bit about sort of where I'm coming from, additional to, poll analysis, which you take with a grain of salt, looking at what the candidates say, the platforms, using my own common sense sort of judgment. But you can't use this method. If you're partisan, you cannot judge whether a person looks presidential, because that partisan proportion of you is nudging you in one direction or another. You end up underestimating a candidate from a party you don't like. Like if you're a dedicated Democrat, you look at Trump, you say, of course he's not believable. Like we've got a clown in chief. Yes, but that's not the way that a lot of centrists see it. You've got to put aside that bias. You're like a MAGA hat wearer. You probably look at all the Democrats, say, well, they're all sputum. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard's okay. That's not the way that the average voter sees it, though. If they're the people you need to win over are the independents and the soft support voters that lean maybe a little left or right, but ultimately they're not partisan. They're not ideologically far out, and they're not partisan. Those are the people, that several tens of millions of Americans scattered across the country, especially in vulnerable swing states, are the people you're whining and dining. That and playing up to your core fan base. If Trump went far left, said, well, I want the Democrats to vote for me too, you're never going to get more than like 65% of a vote. Even if your candidate was a literal scumbag, they could be exposed as a serial rapist, and you still would not get 100% of the vote. It's impossible, because of the metrics of politics being what they were. A lot of people, they're so partisan, they'd be partisan against you, they'd just end up not voting or voting third party. You still wouldn't end up getting 100%. It's just the way that it works. That's about all. Peace out.